Okay, let's dive right into this. Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're unpacking the epic tale, the dazzling myths, and the intense historical controversies surrounding one of history's absolute most famous names, Marco Polo. Now, if you think you know the whole story just from, your middle school history class or playing tag in a swimming pool, you are in for a serious treat.
To really grasp the sheer scale of his journey, we kind of have to start with this staggering number right here, 15,000. That is 15,000 miles that Marco Polo traveled across Asia, by land and sea, over the course of 24 years. I mean, just imagine doing that in the 13th century, crossing deserts, navigating bandits, sailing completely unknown oceans. It's just an unbelievable feat.
But, here is where things get really spicy. Despite the massive fame of his journey, historians have spent centuries debating this very intense investigative question. Was he actually a fraud? Did Marco Polo really reach China, or was he just the medieval equivalent of a guy photoshopping himself in front of the Eiffel Tower?
Well, to figure that out, we can't just look at the controversy in a vacuum. Before we put Marco Polo on trial, it's absolutely crucial we map out the incredible adventure that sparked the legend in the very first place.
Section 1. The Epic Journey East.
So it all began in Venice around the year 1254, which is how a Venetian teenager found himself venturing deep into the unknown. See, Marco's father and uncle, who were wealthy merchants, actually left Venice before he was even born. Then, in 1271, they scooped up a 17-year-old Marco and headed back east. After years on the treacherous Silk Road, they finally arrived at the court of the Mongol ruler Kublai Khan. And get this, they didn't leave China until 1292, finally making it back to Venice in 1295.
Now, Marco didn't just visit China as some tourist taking in the sights. He stayed for 17 years. He completely embedded himself into the Yuan dynasty. And because he knew multiple languages and was just incredibly observant, Kublai Khan actually appointed him to serve as a highly respected foreign emissary. He was sending him on diplomatic missions all over Southeast Asia. This unprecedented access is exactly why his eventual account of the East was so wildly detailed.
Section 2. Writing the bestseller. Having a crazy adventure is one thing, right? But how did the rest of the world actually find out about these travels without, social media? Well, it took a stroke of incredibly bad luck. Shortly after returning home with a literal fortune in gemstones, Marco was captured in a skirmish by the Genoese in 1296. So to pass the time in a prison cell, he dictated his adventures to his cellmate, a guy named Rustichello da Pisa. And by the time Marco was released in 1299, this manuscript was already becoming the world's first global bestseller. But there was a catch. His ghostwriter, Rustichello, he wasn't a journalist, he was a writer of Arthurian romances. So he heavily romanticized Marco's text to make it more exciting for medieval readers. He even lifted the exact introduction of Marco's book straight from one of his own earlier tales about King Arthur. No way, right? It was designed to be a blockbuster, not a dry encyclopedia. And understanding this matters so much because this blending of fact and fiction is exactly what birthed the centuries of skepticism we're about to explore.
Section 3. Did he really go?
Because of these fabulous embellishments from his ghostwriter, skeptics have actually built a really strong case against his authenticity, pointing to this core historical tension. Marco completely missed things that we consider, absolutely iconic to China. The Great Wall, drinking tea, using chopsticks, the practice of foot binding. Not in there. Yet on the flip side, he perfectly described totally obscure economic mechanics. Things like paper money, the complexities of salt revenues, and highly advanced watertight ship compartments. It's like, how on earth could he miss the Great Wall, but know the tax code inside and out?
Furthermore, skeptics point to some highly improbable claims in his book. For instance, the text actually claims he ruled the Chinese city of Yangzhou as governor for 3 whole years. Or the claim that his family provided the Mongols with technical advice on building siege engines for the Battle of Shenyang, which is super interesting because history proves that battle ended before Marco even arrived in China.
Section 4. The Evidence for Marco.
So, things look a bit shaky for our guy, right? Well, despite these flaws, modern scholars overwhelmingly believe he really did make it to China. When we systematically break down the skeptics' arguments, his story actually holds up remarkably well. I mean, why didn't he mention the Great Wall? Because the massive stone structure we know today was built centuries later by the Ming dynasty. Foot binding? That was an extreme practice nearly unknown among the Mongols he actually served. And tea? Other confirmed Western travelers of the era completely failed to mention it too. So his omissions actually perfectly align with the geopolitical realities of the 13th century.
So the absolutely crucial point for the defense here is the undeniable accuracy of what he did include. Marco provided uniquely detailed economic facts about paper currency, the exact shape and size of local coins, and the precise revenues from the salt monopoly. No other Western, Arab, or Persian source contained these hyper-accurate details at the time, and today, modern Chinese archaeological records totally back him up. He couldn't have just guessed this stuff from a prison cell in Italy, you know?
And if you want a true mic-drop piece of evidence, consider this. Marco shared astronomical observations with a Paduan philosopher named Pietro de Bono, and that included a drawing of a comet shaped like a sack. Now, modern astronomers confirm no such comet was seen in Europe at the end of the 13th century, but guess what? A comet was officially recorded in China and Indonesia in 1293, which is right when Marco was traveling through those exact regions.
Section 5. A lasting legacy. So, whether he was a slight exaggerator just trying to impress his friends, or a meticulous observer trapped with a romance novelist ghostwriter, his book forever changed the world. But first, we have to quickly debunk a really persistent myth. Marco Polo did not introduce pasta to Italy. I know, it's a great story, but it was actually invented in the 1920s by an American food magazine trying to sell more spaghetti. In reality, Arabs introduced durum wheat to Sicily in the 9th century, which is, about 400 years before Marco even packed his bags.
His true, undeniable legacy is far more world-shifting than noodles. His vivid descriptions laid the cartographical groundwork for the famous Fra Mauro map in the 15th century. And even more incredibly, his writings directly inspired the Age of Discovery. I mean, Christopher Columbus literally carried a heavily annotated copy of Marco Polo's book with him when he set sail across the Atlantic Ocean. Talk about a real game changer.
We're going to end this explainer with Marco Polo's famous deathbed quote from 1324. When pressured by priests and friends to finally just admit his book was a fabricated fairy tale, he refused. Instead, he uttered this absolute legend of a sentence. I have not told half of what I saw. It's such a provocative thought, and it challenges us even today. I mean, think about it. If his book, with all its mind-blowing marvels, was really only half the story, what incredible, unbelievable wonders did he keep entirely to himself? Thanks so much for learning with me today, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.